We got Jim Freedom right there. If y'all haven't subscribed to him, make sure to sub to him. That's Jim Freedom. He has killer videos and killer editing content.
So in opening up this conversation, again, we're talking about policing in the city of Tempe. The first question that was submitted was by Brian Messinas. Mark Mitchell has previously said he supports a civilian review board with subpoena and firing power, and that's been stated on video. Has your stance changed, and what will you do to get this done for Tempeans?
Thank you for the question. And more importantly, I'm open for change. We have a citizen review panel right now, and we're open for transparency. I'm very open for making sure that we have a very requirement for diverse makeup of our review panel, and we're always open to suggestions regarding our review panel in terms of legalities, what we can and can't do. So I'm very open to the suggestions, transparency, as well as making sure that we have a diverse makeup of our citizen review board, as well as making sure that citizens can have an opportunity to report claims as well, or citizens' complaints as well to the review panel.
So, do you support at this moment a review board with subpoena power and hiring and firing power?
Well, at the moment, I think this is something we can take under consideration, and as we can answer the questions further in terms of legality, I don't know what we can and can't do, but that's something that we can bring back to future meetings of this so that we can look into the ways in which how we handle those issues.
Thank you, Mayor. Next question was from Ruth Lindsay, and it says, has the city acquired military weapons from the federal government, and what possible use could cops have for weapons of war?
Well, I suppose I should answer that one. I'm not aware of any weapon systems that we have received through the program that offers such weapons to municipalities. I would just say that we have not. If we were to pursue any kind of achievement of any kind of surplus from the military, it would be for those kinds of things that would provide shelter to people during a catastrophe. It would be for those things that provide personal safety equipment to the men and women that then safeguard people. I can't imagine a time where we would acquire weapons from the military. So I don't know of any at this time.
Another question, Miriam, are you willing to adopt a civilian oversight process that is the same as the one passed in Phoenix? And I think the mayor kind of alluded to that, but I'll let Chief answer that specifically.
Well, since 1999, we have had a citizens review panel. Since 1999. That panel is composed of citizens, it's composed of police personnel, and upon an incident that will be reviewed by the panel, we get a sub-panel of 6 citizen members and 2 police department members. It's 1 sergeant and 1 line level officer with the citizens. Before they're even impaneled, the group goes through rigorous training to understand policy, to understand policing, to understand use of force more broadly, and a number of other things. That body is trained. Then when they are impaneled, they come together. Individually, they examine the entirety of the case. Nothing is held back from the members of the panel. It is a very rigorous, intensive, emotional commitment that they make to examine the data in any kind of encounter. From there, they make recommendations. One of the 4 recommendations that they make are they can agree with the finding, they can disagree, they can advise the chief of police if further investigation is warranted or demanded. And upon review of a use of force incident, the body can make a further finding of if the use of force was in policy or out of policy. So the people that are impaneled, that are part of the Citizens Review Panel, see everything, and then they are empowered with advising the chief of police.
Chief,
So, yes, sir.
do they see the information post or pre-adjudication?
Typically, it is after the case is adjudicated. In any kind of fatal encounter, an officer-involved shooting, there are 2 branches that occur. There's a criminal investigation with homicide investigators and professionals that leave no stone unturned to gather evidence. Then that body sends the case over to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, where we know that the Maricopa County Attorney's Office makes a finding, a criminal finding. The other side is one of our administrative or internal investigations. That is where our internal investigation staff does a very similar investigation, leaving no stone unturned, and they create a complete investigation with allegations, the whole investigation, and then findings. They're very distinct by design and by statute.
Thank you, Chief. We have a question by Joel Cornabo. And I want to make sure I ask this correctly. Are you willing to remove officers from the civilian review panel since they are already on the force review committee? Joel, where are you? Are you here? Okay. That's the question. Are you willing to remove officers from the civilian review panel since they're already in the force review committee or use of force review committee? Okay. Chief.
So that would require a change to the ordinance, for which it is outside the realm of the police department. I do not understand what we would hope to achieve by removing professionals internally. And what is independence gain?
Okay, real quick. Hey guys, real quick. So let me explain something real quick. Let me kind of give you the rules and the groundwork. So anytime, let me give you the rules and the groundwork. Anytime we desire to have dialogue or have a conversation, the first thing that we have to do is be respectful. That's period. You have to be respectful. Because what's going on is bigger than any one person or any one individual. You may not like the chief of police, and that's fine. But guess what? She sits in the office until she's no longer the chief of police. You may not like the mayor, that's fine. But he's the mayor until he's not. So in order for us to have an effective conversation and dialogue, everybody in this room, we all have to be respectful. I understand emotions may be heightened, but at the end of the day, for people to have a conversation with you, we have to be respectful. So I ask tonight that you please refrain from being disrespectful, refrain from outbursts. If you have a question, we'll get it asked. If you don't get an answer that is acceptable, talk to me and we'll figure these things out. But at the end of the day, we will not start shouting. We will not start going back and forth. We're not going to do that tonight because that's not effective and that is not beneficial to anybody in this room. So are we all clear on that? Thank you all. All right, so next question. Throughout the use of force policy, is the reasonable belief a subjective term that allows for implicit bias and death of a young teen of color by police being justified in your policy? Will you remove reasonable belief? And that question was by Sarah.
So that is the standard set forth by the Supreme Court. The prevailing court in the land has determined through a rigorous process that Graham v. Connor is the law of the land, and it states objectively reasonable. Now imagine, that is what the officer knew at the time, what they perceived before them. The trap is, if we apply that same standard after an event, knowing other factors, or beyond the complexity, beyond the heightened emotion, beyond the event that is occurring right before an officer. And so the law of the land is objectively reasonable, and that will remain in our policy.
Chief, a follow-up to that. So Graham v. Conner, it is a civil case that went to the Supreme Court. So do you think that that particular civil case is something that we should use as a standard for criminal prosecution when you look at an officer?
Well, that is a law of the land that is foundational and that is considered when any body is considering criminal charges.
Okay. So again, the follow-up to that, basically, there's been a lot of conversation about this, and again, this being a civil case, but we're using the civil case to justify a criminal matter. So there are several people who are running for a county attorney, and they all have said that they would not use a civil ruling to justify criminal charges. So if a county attorney decides to use criminal statutes for a criminal case, as the chief of police, would you stand with the county attorney in doing that?
It's difficult under that circumstance to say I would in whole. There is I believe that the Supreme Court has examined a body of cases to still arrive at and solidify the belief that objectively reasonable is the right standard given where we are as a society.
Chief, it's stated that you said that police are tougher on their peers in terms of discipline than civilian review boards. And the question is asked, does anybody in the room believe that? That officers are tougher? This is a question for the audience. Does the audience believe that officers are tougher on officers in terms of discipline than civilians would be? How many of you believe that officers would be tougher?
Anybody.
Just raise your hand for me. It's okay. Just raise your hand. Do you believe that officers would be tougher? Raise your hand. I want to see it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for participating. So the question, Chief, is you made that statement. Police are tougher on their peers in terms of discipline than civilian review boards, and the citizens of Tempe, those who are here, do not believe that that is true. So how can you reaffirm that and allow them to believe that that actually is true? And also, in this, okay, go ahead and answer the question.
So what Pastor Miller is referring to is I served on a panel with ASU School of Criminology with a gentleman who was an attorney and in charge of or a member of, I don't recall which, of the LAPD Police Commission. He is now working with Chicago PD. And he said that in his experience in serving on the police commission, he found that the officers in a review capacity in internal affairs are those that examine and render discipline based on officer behavior. Police officers rendered far more strict discipline, and they were far harder, tougher, using this term, on their peers than the civilian review boards were. He said, and he had research that bore out, that citizen review boards give wider permission for officer behavior, in his experience, than did police officers. So, in my experience, I have found, and there are many professional bodies that have found something similar, that I have found that officers hold other officers to a higher standard and higher accountability. We have shown it in Tempe. We have shown that our officers are willing to come forward when one of their peers errs and to hold them accountable. And so that was his statement. I did no independent research to corroborate his statement and his research, but I have the experience as well.
So, Jim, where are you at? Okay. So, Jim, I'll let you, if you can come up here real quick, explain what the question is. So the question is it possible to stop enforcing victimless laws? So I want you to kind of explain it for us. And then this is a question for the chief, right? Mike's right. Thank you.
Is it possible to stop enforcing victimless laws?
So
like, victimless law is like drugs, for one thing. Obviously, other cities, I know that might be a shock value for some people, but other cities have found that when you decriminalize drugs and you treat it like a health
object to any assertion that jaywalking or not wearing a seatbelt is a victimless law. And we vigorously enforce those things that are Arizona revised statutes passed by Arizona. So I can't imagine a time or space where we would do that.
Okay. So guys, you guys are filling out cards, and that's great. I appreciate it. But I need you to do me a favor. Please put your name and your email address on it so I can reach back out to you if it's not answered. Because there are a lot of cards up there right now with no names on them. So you don't have to be anonymous. Nobody's going to punish you for a question that you asked. And I want to make sure I can reach out to you if you have a question. So if it doesn't get asked and you don't give me a name, there's no way for me to follow up with you. And then you'll leave and you'll feel like your question's not being answered. And I don't want that. So please, if you know that you submitted a card and you've not heard your question, you may want to come up here and we can give it to you and we can ask it. All right? So Michael asked the question is for the mayor, the chief, and the city manager. Yes or no? He said that's all he wants. Do you believe it is morally right for one person to cease the life of another person?
I think humanity dictates that we interact with each other in a way that respects humanity.
I agree. I mean, serving as a mayor, but also growing up in this community and being a father, and working with a lot of friends here that are here today, humanity is the most important aspect. And I think it's important that we make sure that we understand human life, and it's a tragic that life is taken. Under no circumstances, I think it's important that we value life. We all do. That's why we're here. And we value our community. So I think it's important that we continue to value humanity.
I think the presumptive answer for me would be no, but I also understand that there are times when you have to defend yourself, and there's the history of man is replete with examples that although no one wants to be in a position to have to take another person's life, that sometimes it is more morally correct to do so if it prevents harm to others. That would be my answer.
All right, this question is from Ruth Lindsay, is to the chief. Instead of telling us what you think Tempe PD is doing right, please offer ideas to improve. Your cops are perceived as bullies and the community is not satisfied.
Well, I would say that by all accounts, we have a survey that says 84% of our citizens are satisfied with the service we provide. Does that mean that we always do it right? No. Does it mean that we are going to rest and believe that we can just continue to do policing the same way in every circumstance? No. So I would say that I'm not sure how I've described that we do everything right. I could say that largely the men and women in Tempe trust the Tempe Police Department. They feel satisfied with the service that we provide, but that is not an invitation for us to stop assessing self, and it is not an invitation for us to stop improving the way we engage with people.
So for those of you who are in the room, how many of you are satisfied with Tempe Police?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How many of you are not? Thank you.
And I'd ask those that raise your hand that you're not, how many of you live in Tempe that were served?
What was the question?
Of those that said they're not satisfied, how many that raised their hand that they're not satisfied do live in Tempe?
And the reason for that question is because at the end of the day, if the chief is saying that the majority of people are satisfied, and we look in the room and we see about 40% of the people who are here raise their hands and say they're not, that means that we have work to do. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Absolutely, right. So if you guys would say you're not satisfied, again, that is why this meeting is so important, that we find out what you're not satisfied about. All right, so the next question is from Joel. Are you willing to remove G4S from public parks to stop traumatizing kids in the culture of fear?
So G4S, there's an underlying assumption in that question that kids are traumatized. G4S is a body of professional folks that have been hired, contracted with by the police department, and trained in a number of things. They accepted and engaged in training far above and beyond what we initially asked them to, so that they are CIT trained. They engage in de-escalation in a number of identifications of what services people need. They understand our services in Tempe. They can connect people with services. I would say that I feel it's fiscally responsible. It reflects the demands that many neighborhoods had regarding the activation, the positive activation of parks, because what folks in Tempe said to us is that illegitimate use of our parks is driving out legitimate use. So when folks came to us and said, we don't feel safe in our park, we said, we examined the issue. And we said, why do you believe illegitimate use is driving out legitimate use? And what can we do as responsible fiscal stewards? And we made a determination not just to hire anybody off the street, but to hire trusted and proven folks that would accept additional training in how to interact with people. And we hired G4S. And the communities are speaking to us and saying they feel safer in the parks. They have interacted with G4S and largely feel that the interaction is positive, it's professional, and it's achieving what they asked us as those that safeguard them. It's achieving what they asked us to do. So I would not support that at this time.
How many of you support their presence in parks? Thank you. How many of you have had a negative encounter with their presence in parks? Thank you. Next question, Sarah. We are aware of the fact that the police have long-range acoustic device, which is a military weapon used against peaceful protesters. Why are you violating peaceful protesters' First Amendment rights? And what is the official policy when you use LRAD? Because last time we were informed you did not have it.
So I'm not aware of our use of LRAD. And so I'm not aware of our use of LRAD.
So that's not something that the City of Tempe Police Department deploys.
I am not aware of LRAD use in Tempe.
Come to the mic.
Tempe had, the police had an open house day where they showed us the LRAD, so they do have these weapons, and we've seen you take them out at protests. I've personally seen them with my own eyes at protests. So I'm speaking from experience here, and you've also showed them at your open house day. When then we asked you, did you have a policy of when to use it? And we were informed by your department that you did not.
So if we showed it, I would connect with the team and find out under which conditions we use them. It's not a weapon. LRAD is a tested device that disrupts and disorients in order for people to disperse. It would typically be used in an instance where a protest has become violent or disruptive to reset folks to get them to disperse. And that would be the typical use. But I have to look to see how it is used, if it's used in Tempe.
All right, a question from Linda Arters. I believe we must recognize and address that law enforcement individuals who is also a human being with loved ones who want their cop to come home after every shift. What is the Tempe Police Department doing to address the human side of being a cop to the public? In other words, you call 911 for help in an emergency, but how many of our residents will face down the robber, assaulter, shooter with a gun? The public runs the other way. We must also teach others to honor and respect the cops. So I don't think that is particularly, well, there is a question in there. I think a lot of that is also a statement. So the question for the chief is, what are you doing to address the human side of being a cop to the public?
So we're doing many things. First of all, we have engaged in mindfulness and meditation for our officers. The important thing to
add to her question.
I wanted to clarify, just Chief Warner. into the two-way communication, so we're listening to all what you're doing for the officers. But I strongly believe that what I meant was how many people will go beat a cop for the night and address the trouble. What is Tempe PD doing or could do, or the city could do, to explain more about what is actually the life of a cop? What is it like, and what is it like for their family members? I think that possibly getting more of that understanding where they will walk a mile in their shoes would help as we work together to get some conflict resolution and some understanding on both sides.
Okay, let me kind of address that a little bit. How many of you know that all police officers are not bad? How many of you know that? Okay, I think almost everybody raised their hand. I want to make sure I get everybody. How many of you know that all police officers are not bad? Okay, so everybody in the room raised their hands. So we are, oh, you believe everybody, there are all police officers bad? Okay, we'll talk later. But here's the thing. 99.999% of us in the room raised our hands and said that we believe that all police officers are not bad. But we do know that there are bad police officers. How many of you believe that? Okay, so everybody believes that. There are bad police officers, right? And I believe at the end of the day, no one is trying to discredit the humanity of police officers. Everyone knows, how many of you have a relative who works in the police department? How many of you have friends who work in the police department? Okay? So almost everybody in this room is touched by someone who wears a shield and a gun, who goes out and risks their lives on a daily basis. And how many of you want them to come back home? We all do, right? So at the end of the day, no one is trying to villainize or make officers, all officers, bad. That is not what these conversations are about. That is not what I believe the community is saying. But I believe we're saying that there are officers that have issues that probably should not be on the street. And we want to address that when that occurs. Is that right? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, just checking, making sure everybody's still woke. If you got a neighbor next to you in their sleep, wake them up.
No, it's not just individual officers, it's institutions and systems.
So institutional, systematic issues. Yes, there are many systematic issues that we are aware of. And at the root cause of most of the things that we're doing now, the conversations that we're having, looking at policies, those are aimed at looking at systematic problems in policing. That is exactly what it is. So many, excuse me?
I'm just saying it's not just individual bad cops. It's systems that keep.
But listen to this, At the end of the day, you do not want a bad police officer on the street. So as we tackle systematic issues, at the end of the day, you don't want bad cops on the street. So we want to make sure that those officers who shouldn't be on the street are not on the street, as we still tackle those things that are systematic. If you can be honest, and we all can be honest, there have been problems with policing since 1776. So we're not going to fix those overnight. So it's going to take time. It's going to take people like you who have a voice, who see a problem and issue, sharing what you see to get systematic change. Okay? So I just want to be clear on that. Nobody in here is trying to villainize all police officers. So I just want to be clear on that. All right. So I hold a seat. This is actually a good segue to this statement. I'm not sure if they want me to say their name, but I hold a seat on the Use of Force Board. I wanted to just comment that we look at all body-worn video, and that holding back video or audio is not done. We don't look to cover the backs, we look for the truth. And this is a citizen comment. Yours, Jamie. Thank you so much for that. All right. Question, no name. Sarah, right now, the Citizen Review Panel does not separate investigations. Would you be willing to create separate investigations so the police aren't investigating themselves? So, in the city of Mesa, when the Robert Johnson incident happened with the excessive force case, the city of Mesa sent those cases. There were two cases. There was the Date case and then the Robert Johnson case. They took both of those cases and they sent those up to the city of Scottsdale to be investigated. When the city of Scottsdale investigated those cases, for the Robert Johnson case, they said nope, they did everything within law. For the Date case, they said the officers had violated the law and the county attorney should charge them with aggravated assault charges. So Chief, are you willing to send investigations outside of Tempe schools?
In certain circumstances, it may be warranted.
In certain instances, they want to.
Maybe. We haven't found that has been necessary, but I think the question was largely about removing officers from the Citizens Review Panel. Is that accurate?
That was a previous question.
Oh, it was okay.
She said you can answer that. She wants an answer to that.
So we have 2 sergeants and 2 officers in addition to citizens, and we think it is a healthy way to form the panel. It's also in ordinance that is the way that the panel is composed.
Is Alex Love here still?
Yeah.
Can you please come forward?
Okay.
I want you to ask your question. And while he's coming, I'll ask this question. Are you willing to remove AR-15s on the back of motorcycles to stop the culture of fear?
Well, arriving at the decision to put a long rifle on a motorcycle, I did not reach it easily. I will tell you there are many things that informed the decision, and it was agonizing. It was agonizing because I understand the optics. It was agonizing because we live in a society where we have to arm police officers with long guns to eliminate threats from people with similar weapons. I did not arrive at that decision by happenstance. I arrived at that decision by asking the question, given our environment, given traffic intensity, given the physical environment that we police in Tempe, can officers get to threats in a time that we expect them to arrive at a threat? I was sufficiently concerned with our ability to rapidly respond, so I commissioned a study, and I asked the folks to examine what might it look like if we were to find a rifle that would fit on a motorcycle in the saddlebags or in some container in the motorcycle, so that motorcycle, given traffic intensity, could get to the threat and eliminate a threat, where perhaps a car couldn't. And so our team went out and they studied a variety of systems. And what they found was, they reported back that the weight of all of the equipment that we have currently on our motorcycles, that the condition that was created by adding another box, container, to the motorcycle with a weapon inside so it was hidden from view but easily accessible by an officer when it was appropriate, they said it was unsafe. And it was unsafe because of the engineering of the motorcycle. They said it created a wobble. Now, to me, that just means the motorcycle is unsafe. For motor officers and those folks in engineering, they said it was frightening and it was not possible. So they came to me and they said, Chief, we have 2 options. One is we put the rifle on the motorcycle, but it will be in plain view. The second is we don't arm officers with an equal weapon that would be able to eliminate the threat. We could do nothing. I did not arrive at the decision rapidly. I didn't arrive at it without angst. I arrived at the decision because of my higher duty. And my belief was that while some might find it surprising, some folks might see a weapon system on a motorcycle and find it shocking, I said more shocking to me is not rising to my duty and not doing anything. And it was after I met with folks from Sandy Hook Promise, the parents of young kids that were murdered in the Sandy Hook massacre.
And I called Tempe Police Department for a mental health crisis on January 20th in the evening. Tempe Police Department arrived to my home with 2 guns drawn, K-9 dog, riot gear for a mental health crisis call. Myself and my younger son came out of our front door to not be able to go back into my apartment where my son, who was having the mental crisis, was alone. We were escorted down 3 flights of stairs by your police department. The sergeant, who I did not know at the time was a sergeant because I requested a supervisor, stated that my son had a felon. And when I called 911, I stated it was a mental health crisis call. I stated my son's first and last name and my son's date of birth. 24 hours later, after my son was taken into custody to Community Bridges, my son was transported to St. Luke Hospital, where I learned that the petition was in the incorrect name. The name of the gentleman is a known felon with 2 warrants. The night of the incident, I gave your officers my son's phone number and his name. What I want to know is, what are the police doing with CTI training? I call for a mental health crisis. My son is not a felon. My son's name is now associated as an AKA of a felon. And we are still trying to get this resolved. 2 months later, my son was admitted into Community Bridges Hospital, where he stayed for 5 days under a wrong petition. My son did not get the mental health medical attention that he deserved, and why I called 911 for a mental health crisis call on January 20th. I asked for an investigation. Internal Affairs officer called me back 2 weeks ago, stated that they saw the body cam, of which 2 guns were drawn on my youngest son. My son has not really left my house since January 20th. They closed the case. Internal Affairs said they recognized their errors, they heard dispatch, they saw body cam, and they closed the case. They can't fault my sons because they're not criminals. And the thing that they said was, ma'am, you said that there were knives in your home. You said that you needed help, and you were cursing on the call. So for that reason, I'm faulted, because I'm dealing with a medical mental health crisis, trying to call for help. And my son was treated like a felon. The difference in regards to the height of my son and the felon, almost 1 foot difference. He was a black male, and what I'd like to ask is, you talk about transparency, Chief, you talk about these things. This is not a meeting to just eat snacks and have further discussions. This is a meeting that we are requesting action from. I come from a family of peace officers, retired peace officers. Your officers, 7 or 8 of them responded to that call that evening. None of them recognized, even after I said my son's legal name, did they verify? Did they have any other questions to ask to nullify my son and get him the proper treatment? Because they assumed he was a felon. I want transparency. I want this case reopened with Internal Affairs. And this is a problem that we are facing because there's no policy that is standardized. With Tempe PD, the mental health crisis, there was a mental health officer that was on that call that night, and he never was activated. He was on standby until he received direction from the officers. That did not happen.
Thank you, Ms. Adrian. Thank you so much. Chief.
So Ms. Bryant brought up this issue before, and I don't want to go through the whole case right here in front of everyone. I think it respects you, respects the privacy of your son and his mental health condition.
I'm not embarrassed by any of that.
And I think it's the best thing for us to do for you and I to sit down and talk about that, and perhaps convene with Lieutenant Collins, who was the primary investigator on the case in its entirety, and lay out everything for you and see where we need to make improvements and discuss the case in full. And I'd like to do that with you privately.
Well, I would appreciate that. I reached out to you 2 months ago, along with the mayor, the vice mayor, the councilmen, the councilwomen, city manager.
And I would relieve them of that because it solely rests with me, Ms. Bryant. Okay.
Now, let me also make another statement. Again, Many of you are asking for policy changes. You're asking for actionable things. The actionable things, the chief, the city manager, and the mayor cannot always give you an actionable item just off the fly. So let's just be clear on that. City governments don't necessarily work like that. So they cannot give you an actionable item, a policy change, right here tonight off of the fly. That is not how this thing works. So if you have a question that is pertaining to a policy change and something that you desire to see, it does take time for that to happen. And that is why we're going to follow up with every concern, every question, and every policy item that you have tonight.
What will be future precautions officers take to make sure the life of youth or any life is wrongfully taken by police, excluding training?
Excluding training? So, I've talked about it before. We are recruiting and selecting people with distinction. We are training our folks in well, you didn't want me to talk about training, but I will emphasize we train them in an array of tactics, of de-escalation, of how to remove and separate people from violence, how to use means to calm self and reduce the likelihood of a force encounter. We reinforce our policies. And here's the reality. We can have everything in place, everything right leading up to an event, everything supportive, everything in our culture to ensure that officers have the training and the tools, that they're trusted, that we have policies that are sound, and we can still have a human being that operates outside of our values and inconsistent with our training and our expectations. We are committed to reducing the probability of a fatal encounter such as many that have been played out across this nation. So it is for us about reducing the likelihood of a flawed and fatal encounter.
All right, this question is for Darian. How can we ensure mistaken identity isn't an ongoing issue? In the case of Alderman Lee, he was mistaken as a 6-foot male with brown hair. Note that he's bald by Officer Rodriguez. Okay. How will we stop this racial profiling? Basically, in the mistaken identity being an issue. How will we stop this?
Well, I'm not familiar with the case that is being expressed. We have human beings that are call takers, human beings that are dispatchers, and human beings that are police officers. They are armed with information. They use all the tools that they have to appropriately identify folks. And mistakes still occur. So I think the way to reduce it is that we hold ourselves accountable. If there is a mistake of fact, we do the right thing to admit there's been a mistake of fact. And so that is how we would engage with that.
This question is from, all right, I don't want to mispronounce it. Can you train your police that we are allowed as protesters to walk on the sidewalk? Do not deserve to be almost grabbed and taken to jail. With them trying to grab my 11-year-old granddaughter when we are just walking. Okay, so can you train your police that we are allowed as protesters to walk on the sidewalk? Basically, no one deserves being grabbed or taken to jail. This lady had her 11-year-old granddaughter who was almost accosted by the police, and they were walking peacefully. So I think also one of the crux of this question is there are times where police officers do not really understand the parameters that they're allowed to do, or the things that they're allowed to do in policing. And so you'll find an occasion where someone is protesting peacefully, and then they may be accosted by a police officer because the officer believes or perceives that they're doing something that they should not be doing. So what are we doing to train the Tempe police officers about peaceful protests?
It starts in the basic academy with understanding the Constitution. Police officers that work in Tempe and everywhere else I've seen respect their responsibility to protect the rights of people to protest as much as those to enjoy a crime-free life. And so our officers are trained generally. Our incident response team, they are specifically trained in tools and tactics to ensure that folks can protest in a way that is peaceful and meaningful and doesn't disrupt or harm others.
Thank you, Chief. Jules' question, Jewel asks, are you willing to remove the counterterrorism unit with stingrays, which intimidate peaceful protesters and our First Amendment rights?
The Tempe Police Department doesn't have a counterterrorism unit or a stingray device. Any use of a stingray goes through a rigorous process before a magistrate. The use of such a tool to surveil people rises to such a level that it cannot be just easily entered into. There is no Tempe police officer that would engage in use of such a device without going through the very necessary protections of the citizens of our society that require a police officer to go before a magistrate to deliver facts so the magistrate could determine if it's an appropriate use of such a device. To imply that a Tempe police officer would do such a thing is merely ill-informed. We don't have a counterterrorism unit, and perhaps the person who asked the question can clarify what they're talking about.
So I'm really wondering what's the point of this forum when you're just bold-faced lying to us over and over again.
Wait, let me stop. So again, let me explain what I said at the beginning of the hour. No. Listen.
We want the truth.
Listen. So, at the end of the day, when you talk about respect, you can give respect. If you're not getting an answer that satisfies you, that's one thing. But nobody is being disrespectful to you. So you may get an answer that you do not like, but that's not disrespect. So wait.
When it's not truthful, that's disrespectful.
Let me finish. Perception is one thing. Facts are another.
We have facts.
Let me finish. So at the end of the day, don't be disrespectful, because that is not conducive to dialogue.
What you're doing is tone policing, which is something that happens often to Black women. So let me finish what I was saying. What I'm saying is, we have data. I'm telling you that we've been affected by LRAD and stingrays, and then you're denying our experience. I'm telling you that I'm afraid when I go into parks, when I live next to the park, and I see G4S holding their guns while they watch kids on skate parks. There's no reason for that. And when I'm telling you that I feel scared and we don't trust the police, when I'm telling you we can look at, you want data, we can look at statistics, and we can look at across the country models for citizen review board, and they don't have police because that's not independent. If it's not independent, then it doesn't meet the requirements of community. And we just passed a brilliant policy in Phoenix, and we were part of a community coalition, and we made sure that in the community coalition, we made sure that it didn't have to change the city charter. We made sure it didn't affect the police bill of rights. That's why we didn't actually ask for hiring and firing power. In this, we asked for recommendations. We also had a separate office for investigations, and that's actually the standard across the country. You can look at Seattle, you can look at Denver, you can look at Detroit. These are models, and you're denying it, and you're denying our reality. And all I've learned here today is that Sylvia Moore is unremorseful. She doesn't care about our opinion, and she denies our reality when all of us raised our hand that we do not trust the police to investigate themselves. And she says, oh, well, according to my data that was done by police, look, I'm a PhD student. In order for me to publish knowledge, it has to go through a peer review board, and no one else that's in my school can do it because we can't trust ourselves to investigate ourselves. That goes across all disciplines except for the police. So the police are not being treated fairly or equally compared to the rest of the community. And I don't really know what the point of this community conversation is when you're just condescending and you're not listening to us and you're denying our realities. So what is the point for it? Because it's just a conversation so you can check the box, so you can say that, oh, I did this, so you can have it, so you know, as you're on the campaign trail,
Mitchell? Or at least what is the next steps?
Thank you. Thank you. Making sure that the conversations go back and forth and that these are actual proper working relationships. This is not an instance where we're going to only have conversations when something happens of a magnitude that is tragic or traumatic. These will be continual conversations and dialogue. Again, there will be dialogue in smaller sessions where we can hash out certain things. But at the end of the day, the larger meetings are for policy questions to be answered as they stand right then, not for policies to be dictated and changed during the course of the night. So I just want to share that with you all. Again, I gave you a phone number. We will have a landing page soon. And again, thank you all. Have a good night. Thank you for coming. Drive safe. And we'll talk again soon.